Thank you for joining us on our news desk yet again on QTV. The headlines. Health Minister Qtv says investigations have been launched to ascertain circumstances which led to the death of a laboratory technician of Zambezi District Hospital in a road traffic accident while transporting COVID-19 samples using public transport. Democratic Party President Harry Kalava has charged that government's negligence is to blame for the death of the 24-year-old laboratory technician. The Food Reserve Agency, FRA, is urging farmers to prioritize household food security as they begin to harvest their crops. Here now is the news in detail. The country has recorded 13 new coronavirus cases in the last 24 hours out of 811 tests conducted. This brings the cumulative number of COVID-19 cases to 137, with 78 recoveries and 3 deaths. Health Minister Qtv has told the daily COVID-19 briefing that the cases include 9 contacts to non-contacts, 4 of whom are health workers from Chilenje Level 1 Hospital, 3 were detected through health facility screening, and 1 through the mass screening exercise in Lusaka. Dr. Qtv adds that all the new positive cases are adults and are admitted to various isolation facilities in Lusaka. He says of the 59 cases under admission, 52 are in Lusaka, 6 on the Copper Belt and 1 in Kabwe. And Dr. Qtv says 3-month-old baby is very stable and off oxygen and has since tested negative and is awaiting the second test before it could be discharged.
The cases include 9 contacts to known cases, 4 of whom are health workers from Chilenje who did not participate in the initial screening because they were not available at that particular time. They were away, and as they came back, we subjected them to the screening that their colleagues did, and these 4 health workers did test positive. 3 were detected through health facility screening, and 1 through the mass screening exercise in Lusaka. All the new positive cases are adults and are admitted to our various isolation facilities in Lusaka. The number of active cases is therefore 59, with 52 in Lusaka and 6 on the Copper Belt and 1 in Kabwe. All the patients are stable, and today we have not discharged any patient. Therefore, the number of recoveries from the time the outbreak began remains at 78. It is important to note that the team that is doing case management in the isolation facilities is doing a fabulous job. Today, I was privileged with my permanent secretaries to have a Zoom conversation with the team that is managing patients at the front line, and they give wonderful testimonies. They are in high spirits, they are working at the battlefront line, and they are ready to serve.
And Dr. Qtv says an investigation has been launched into the circumstances that led to the death of the 24-year-old laboratory technician Ian Mutambo of Zambezi District Hospital, who died in an accident involving a Power Tools bus while transporting COVID-19 samples.
The Provincial Health Director is working with colleagues in the province and being supervised closely by my office to ensure that we establish the full facts that led to 1, the accident where we lost 4 citizens, including our gallant health worker, and 2, what happened as to the circumstances of the transportation of the COVID-19 sample on the bus. We will revert to the public with full details as we get all the information. For now, I urge the public, bloggers, to allow the family the privacy and the peace to mourn the departed. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zambia, Dr. Edgar Chagolungu, is deeply concerned with what transpired and has directed a full investigation. And I want to assure the public that this investigation has commenced, and we will leave leave no stone unturned to ensure that all the facts are put on the table. In the meantime, let us respect the family and allow them the privacy and dignity to mourn the departed. It is a dark cloud over the medical fraternity. A loss of a soldier at the front line in a public health war is devastating, and we are all devastated by this loss. So we want to hold hands in solidarity and mourn the fallen hero in the dignified manner that he deserves.
National Democratic Congress NDC President Chimba Kambwili has questioned why the 24-year-old laboratory technician was made to transport COVID-19 samples from Zambezi using public transport. Dr. Kambwili says the lack of seriousness being accorded to the coronavirus pandemic to a point where the Ministry of Health has failed to provide adequate logistics towards transportation of COVID-19 samples to laboratory testing sites is very disheartening. The NDC leader states that it is very irresponsible for the Minister of Health to defend the transportation of COVID-19 samples using public transport with the excuse that the vehicles in the ministry were being used for other purposes. He says Dr. Chilufya should know that the World Health Organization and CDC have given guidelines on how COVID-19 samples should be stored and transported, to the effect of designating them as dangerous goods and high-priority samples in the fight against the pandemic. Mr. Kambwili says it is therefore very unethical, dangerous and very inconsiderate to ship samples designated as dangerous goods by WHO and CDC on a public bus filled to capacity.
This is carelessness of the worst kind. And what we expected as Zambia was that the minister was going to say, "Heads will roll, and whoever is going to be found wanting will be punished." But the minister was busy just fine, that there is no problem because they were triple packed. What nonsense. I think Zambians must start getting upset. This government is taking us for a ride. This government is taking us for a ride. Who knows what level of contamination has happened in the river where this bus went? Because that river is a source of water for a lot of people. Surely, people have donated 28 million. We've seen a lot of donations. You can't buy a vehicle even within 700,000, which should be used to carry COVID samples. And by the way, COVID samples are very dangerous because this disease is deadly. And those are biohazards. Surely, where are we going as a country? If Zambians, you don't get upset, this is a reason for you to get upset. And by the way, Zambians believe that this government is fighting COVID. They don't care. Really, this COVID has hit the whole world. America is willing to cope. England is willing to cope. France, Italy. Then you go and carry samples in a public bus, in a cool box. What a shame. I never thought we could stoop so low as a country. But anyway, this government is chipante-pante. Kwangala npamansansa. The minister.
Democratic Party leader Harry Kalava has described the death of Ian Charlie Mutambo as an act of negligence and lack of care on the part of government. Mutambo was transporting COVID-19 samples to the Tropical Disease Research Center, TDRC in Ndola, when the part whose bus he was traveling in lost control and plunged into the Kabombo riverbank. Mr. Kalava has wondered how somebody on duty cannot be given transport to transport the COVID-19 samples when government is claiming to be working hard to fight the coronavirus. He notes that while musicians are airlifted to PF rallies to play music, the same could not be done for an important national undertaking which pertains to Zambia's future. Mr. Kalava states that Zambia's future is on trial as what will come out of the COVID-19 is not known. He says the death of Mutambo could have been avoided. And Mr. Kalava has called for the end to the lack of coordination between the head of state and the Minister of Health, as seen in the President's statement over the death of Mutambo, where he has called for an investigation to be instituted, while the Minister of Health told the nation that the deceased used public transport due to non-availability of vehicles at the hospital. UPND Zambezi East Member of Parliament Brian Kambita has blamed government for the death of Ian Mtambo, the laboratory technician from Zambezi, who died in a road traffic accident involving a Part 2's bus. Mr. Kambita is also demanding for disciplinary action to be taken against all officers, starting with government at Zambezi District Hospital and at provincial level, who authorized the transportation of COVID-19 samples on public transport, including people in charge at the Ministry of Health headquarters. Speaking at a media briefing, Mr. Kambita says government should not pay lip service to this issue, but ensure that serious action is taken against all those who allowed the transportation of COVID-19 samples by public service transport. He says this has brought him an embarrassment to the nation.
And I went straight to the Minister of Health's office. In his office, he was actually in the company of the Honorable Minister for Lusaka Province, Mr. Bowman Musambo. I expressed the same concern, and I mentioned to him that I had actually gone there to pick up whatever was meant for Zambezi East, according to his pronouncements. Members of the press, you will agree with me, and you should have noticed that the minister has been very consistent in announcing that they were distributing most of those donated materials among the members of parliament. I'm yet to know if there is any one of us, members of parliament from UPND, who has actually picked up those materials to take to their constituency to protect our people. It is therefore incorrect to state that the UPND members of parliament have boycotted the fight against coronavirus. I believe it is government's responsibility to protect its people. Whatever individual efforts we are making to help donate a few things, buckets, sanitizers, and many other small things, are just a supplement to the efforts that government is supposed to undertake.
Meanwhile, Third Liberation Movement President Enoch Tonga says there is no justification over the transportation of COVID-19 samples by public service transport and the subsequent death of Ian Mtambo in an accident involving a Part 2's bus. Mr. Tonga tells Qtv News that the death of Mr. Mtambo has confirmed his view that the Patriotic Front administration does not value life. He says the transportation of COVID-19 samples on public transport put the lives of other passengers at risk.
Here is young, energetic Ian Mtambo, 24 years of age, losing his precious life as Power 2's bus plunges itself into Kabompo River, dying on a public transport when Ian Mtambo was on his way to Solwezi, saving the people of this great nation as a frontline health worker, fighting COVID-19, fighting on behalf of Edgar Lungu, fighting on behalf of Dora Syria, fighting on behalf of Chirufia, fighting on behalf of everybody else to fight this enemy called COVID-19. And you have a government that does not care for life, which makes this young man to use a public transport. Edgar Lungu, what do you take the people of Zambia for? Your presidential jet is gathering dust. Your ministers cannot use these vehicles they've got for fear of contracting coronavirus. And you let go a young man to use public transport who has ended up losing his life in a very painful manner. This is cruelty of the worst kind.
The Food Reserve Agency FRA is urging farmers to prioritize household food security as they begin to harvest their crops and only resort to selling when they have excess produce. In a statement, FRA Public Relations Coordinator John Chipandwe says this is considering that national food security begins at household level. Mr. Chipandwe says farmers countrywide are therefore being urged to store sufficient food for domestic future use before selling any of their produce to interested buyers. He says farmers are urged to reflect on their previous farming season and draw lessons from the droughts experienced and stock up sufficient food for future use. Mr. Chipando states that inasmuch as the country is likely to record a bumper harvest for the 2019-2020 farming season, the agency wishes to remind farmers of the ever-changing climatic weather pattern and is encouraging them to plan ahead and store enough food for their households. He adds that the agency is urging farmers countrywide to ensure that they negotiate for competitive prices and not sell their produce at a giveaway price, as is currently being reported. Mr. Chipando says farmers interested in selling their produce to the agency should take note that the agency will enter the market once the moisture content of the maize reaches the required moisture level of 12.5%. The Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition Alliance has called on the government to quickly mobilize more resources towards supporting food aid to people affected by the floods countrywide. And CSO Sun National Coordinator Matthew Muhuru has commended government for releasing 2 million kwacha towards mitigating the effects of floods and hunger in the affected areas across the country. Mr. Muhuru, however, states that the money is not enough to support all the affected 1.5 million people. He says simple calculations show that if divided by the total number of the people affected by the floods as announced by the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, government has only allocated 1 kwacha 33 ngwe per individual, which cannot even afford a single meal. Mr. Muhuru has told QTV News that this support will only go to a few people, leaving many of the affected families by hunger. He has urged government to encourage cooperating partners to consider supporting the cause to ensure that no one dies of hunger in the affected areas.
And the most affected being, pregnant women, women who are lactating, as well as that's the children that are under the age of 5, and cases of death due to hunger might actually be the case. So we are calling on government to quickly see how they can come in and just resolve this problem. And also we are just encouraging government to ensure that just the relief food package itself complements the dietary needs of the affected people. Unlike a situation where in cases of hunger where people have been displaced, where the crop fields have been submerged, people only get a meal support from government. This becomes a problem in that we're spreading what is known in the nutrition circles as the hidden hunger, because the micronutrient deficiencies among these populations that are affected by hunger would be increasing. And this is even a bigger risk in the times of COVID, because immune health and just the hidden hunger, immune health is compromised, and should people get COVID-19 in these areas that we're talking about, then it will be catastrophic, and cases of death will actually increase. So we are making a call on government to quickly see how they can mobilize partners to just deal with the hunger situation. We understand that COVID efforts are priority at the moment, but we also want to see similar support, because actually hunger will claim more lives than what the COVID has. We've seen.
Of disputes, SACOD has welcomed the decision by the Electoral Commission of Zambia to reschedule the electoral timetable in view of the disruptions brought about by the COVID-19. SACOD Executive Director Boniface Chembe notes that there are many key electoral milestones that have to be attained ahead of the 2021 general election, and that having a schedule that logically addresses the needs and interests of stakeholders is paramount in building stakeholders' confidence and ensuring peace. Mr. Chembe notes that some of the key milestones include the issuance of national registration cards, NRCs, registration of voters, printing of ballot papers, and conducting civic, peace, and voter education, among others. He states that the reviewing of the electoral timetable is therefore key so that stakeholders are aware of the new schedule. Mr. Chembe has, however, appealed to the ECZ not to hold the impending by-elections following resignations by UPND councillors together with the scheduled June 2020 ward by-elections.
The rescheduled electoral timeframe will go a long way in helping build stakeholders' confidence and peace in the process, in that once the rescheduling is done, all stakeholders will be availed, the plan, and everybody will be made to be on the same page. A number of important and key milestones are yet to be attained. These include issuance of national registration cards, issuance of voters cards, conducting civic, peace and voter education, printing of ballot papers, among other processes. As ACORD, we also take note of the June 20 scheduled by-elections that will be conducted by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, strictly following the COVID-19 guidelines as provided for by the Government of the Republic of Zambia through the Ministry of Health and also the presidential directives. We are aware that aside from the June 20th, the June 2020 by-elections, there are other pending ward by-elections. Our appeal to the Electoral Commission of Zambia is not to mix up these by-elections. We believe that if by-elections strictly following the COVID-19 guidelines are held, they must be done in small numbers so that we do not spread the concentration and the human resource that is required to successfully handle this handful of by-elections whilst fully protecting human life. We hope that the Electoral Commission of Zambia will carefully consider this appeal so that as much as possible we do conduct by-elections and at the same time ensuring that we protect human life.
Former Finance Minister Felix Mutati has backed calls for the suspension of the implementation of the Employment Code Act as it is worsening the plight of workers and employers. Mr. Mutati is therefore appealing to President Edgar Lungu and Labour Minister Joyce Mukoko to consider suspending the implementation of the Act and engage all stakeholders. He says it is prudent for the Minister of Labour to suspend implementation of the Employment Code Act, considering that it has come at a time when the country is struggling to cope with the coronavirus and an economy that is adversely affected at various levels. Mr. Mutati notes that while the objective of the law is to protect the employees, the struggle of the economy arising from COVID-19 consequences is not allowing fair implementation of the Employment Code Act. He says the Employment Code Act does not provide a friendly legal structure that will help to achieve economic recovery.
But the structure of the economy arising out of COVID is such that going forward, we need to do significant surgery to the economy in order to have a semblance of recovery. And this law, unfortunately, does not provide the ingredients that would help to achieve that recovery. So as we are pondering on the mechanics of recovery, my appeal, and this is earnest appeal, my appeal is that we suspend this particular piece of legislation as we proceed to get our businesses who are struggling immensely to have a semblance of survival. And as we deal with the fundamentals going forward, I don't think it's only this law. There must be other laws that we must look at as a nation, that the way we used to carry on business pre-COVID must fundamentally be different from the way we do things post-COVID. It is not change, it's drastic transformation that requires, including attitudes, including mindset, including our approach to the business. Let's use the crisis as an opportunity for drastic change.
Operation Young Vote OIV has demanded that government updates the nation how far it has gone in developing the Access to Information policy, which will culminate in the formulation of Access to Information Bill. Government has previously said it wants to first develop a policy that will guide the development of the ATI bill. OIV Executive Director Ges Nyirenda states that inasmuch as his organization notes with delight some outcomes of the 12th Special Cabinet meeting held on Thursday, 30th April 2020, especially on approving the introduction of certain bills to Parliament, it is still appalled by the absence of the ATI Act in the country. Mr. Nyirenda says OIV is also appalled by the failure to that's repeal and replace the National Youth Development Council NYDC Act of 1978. And Mr. Nyirenda, however, states that OYV is happy at Cabinet's approval to take to Parliament the NGO bill to repeal and replace the contentious and draconian NGO Act number 16 of 2009. Patriotic Front Information and Publicity Desk Chief Administrator Erasmus Mukondo says President Edgar Lungu will win the 2021 presidential election without difficulties. Mr. Mukondo says President Lungu will retain the seat against all odds because he has delivered development across the country. He has told Qtv News that President Lungu has come up with programs and policies which are being implemented by his government, which have put the country on the path to progress and prosperity. Mr. Mukondo has cited developmental projects ranging from infrastructure in health, education and energy sectors, among other projects.
Especially that we have laid a very strong foundation on which we know that no another government has been achieved or has done. So when it comes to 2021 and our President Juan Edgar Chagwa Lungu, we are relying on our development. We have developed this nation. When we talk by ministry, the means of transport, for instance, we have laid the foundation. That is, if you look at the infrastructure in terms of the airports, very soon we are going to have our national airport linking ourselves to the international community. That is the Ndola Airport, and then also the Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, which will make this country much more linked than before. And that it will mean more trade. Not only more trade, but also what we are talking about as health tourism. We will end up having more injection of foreign aid. So basically, as you have known, even when you talk about the same COVID-19, it is showing the world how linked we are, how close we are related to each other. So this is the reason why we had to invest in infrastructure development when it comes to the airports. And then also when we talk about the means of local government, we will talk about the condition of Lusaka. We have continued rolling out the development, the infrastructure, which we have seen the flyover bridges. If you just come across opposite arcades there's a bridge. After Unza, there's a bridge. You go to Maken, there's a bridge there. It's because we are focused. We know we want to see that Zambia is developed. So basically, when you come to these people who are wishing us or who are trying to sway us from this positive trajectory route that we have taken, it's because they know that what we have been doing is very cardinal to the development.
Zambia Railways Limited says it has put in place a business continuity plan which involves finding ways of keeping the cargo and freight trains running. Company Chief Executive Officer Christopher Msonda says the company will adhere to COVID-19 health guidelines even as they provide the vital service to its business customers, which include sanitizing, observance of social distancing and wearing of masks in offices and public places. Speaking when he received a donation of face masks made by 2 Zambian youths based in South Africa, Mr. Msonda has noted the need to scale up measures aimed at protecting workers from the coronavirus pandemic. He says the 1,200 masks that have been donated by Keolebongile and Ndashe will help the company execute its business continuity plan safely. In a speech read on his behalf by ZRL Director Human Resource and Administration Clyde Siamachoka, Mr. Msonda has since assured that the masks will reach the intended recipients as soon as possible.
This donation would not have come at a better time than now, when government is urging organizations like ours, as well as members of the general public, to scale up measures aimed at protecting us from the coronavirus pandemic, which has been ravaging the entire world, including Southern Africa. The masks we have received today, therefore, will go a long way in helping us as Zambia Railways provide the necessary protection to our crewmen and crew staff who really are our core workers. As Zambia Railways, we are encouraged by the initiative of the 2 youths, especially in remembering the trainmen of Zambia Railways when they could have channeled their resources to other equally deserving sectors or indeed individuals. This we appreciate. So, thank you to you, Kabelogile and Ndashe. Through your donation, you have demonstrated that the fight against the coronavirus should not just be left to the government or corporates alone, but that private individuals can contribute too. Whatever they can afford, because as they say, it's the spirit behind the gift that matters. We urge other youths, especially those in the small businesses, to rise to the occasion and emulate what these two youths have done.
And representing the Youth Grip Corporation Consultancy Head of Business Management, Mavuto Sakala, says the company is committed to helping Zambia in the fight against COVID-19.
We are two young entrepreneurs who met while studying at the University of Victoria in South Africa. We both have a strong belief in uplifting the community and giving back in any way possible. The world is going through a devastating time right now, and it's important that we can come together as a community and help each other whenever it's possible. The private sector has resources that can help many disadvantaged people during this period. We encourage everybody to come together and lend a helping hand. With these few remarks, that is all that came from this gentleman.
We end the news with the top stories. Health Minister Chitaluchi Lufia says investigations have been launched to ascertain circumstances which led to the death of a laboratory technician of Zambezi District Hospital in a road traffic accident while transporting COVID-19 samples using public transport. Democratic Party President Harry Kalaba has charged that government's negligence is to blame for the death of the 24-year-old laboratory technician. And the Food Reserve Agency FRA is urging farmers to prioritize household food security as they begin to harvest their crops. That's the news. Bye-bye.